when we talk about AI, we always focus on the chips, the code,
Right, the algorithms.
but there's this other piece of the puzzle. AI needs energy, and I mean, it needs gargantuan, almost unbelievable amounts of it.
We're talking about power demands that could completely redefine the grid as we know it.
And here's the twist. The very companies demanding all that compute power are now moving to control the energy supply itself. This isn't just about technology anymore.
No, this is about restructuring the very foundation of our public utilities.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We take the stack of sources you send us, articles, research, all of it, and we distill it down.
Down to the crucial nuggets you really need to know.
Today, we're looking at a huge corporate acquisition, but not through the usual lens of, stock prices.
No, the sources frame this as a story of labor, infrastructure, and this concentration of power. They call it quiet greed.
And our mission here is to figure out who structurally benefits and maybe who loses leverage when a tech giant decides to just vertically integrate its own power.
And the central event, the acquisition we're going to be digging into, is Alphabet's move to buy Intersect.
And the price tag is staggering.
It's huge, $4.75 billion in cash. Plus, they're taking on the assumed debt.
Wow.
A price like that for an energy asset. It tells you right away this isn't just a purchase. It's a foundational strategic investment. They're locking down a critical resource.
Absolutely. I mean, $4.75 billion doesn't just buy you a data center. It buys you the future ability to run that data center without anyone else's permission or bottlenecks.
It signals a total shift in strategy.
So let's jump straight into what our sources are calling the new calculus of compute and energy. Why now? Why this move?
Well, it's a classic case of demand just completely outstripping supply.
Okay.
The stated goal, the public reason, is purely functional. They need to expand their energy and data center capacity to meet the insatiable demand from AI and cloud services.
So they're framing it as a necessity.
They are. They're essentially saying the public energy grid, as it's built today, just can't keep pace with their AI roadmap.
And this is where the mechanism gets really fascinating. The core strategy here is something called co-location. It's more than just buying a power plant. What exactly is that?
Okay, so think of it like this. For decades, companies used the public highway system to get their goods to market.
Sure.
And that public highway, it has traffic, it has speed limits, regulations. Co-location is basically Alphabet deciding to build its own private off-ramp and its own dedicated stretch of road.
A road that connects their factory, the data center, directly to their power source.
Exactly. So instead of being a major customer on a shared public grid, they're becoming their own private utility, at least for this one specific use case.
Which means they get to bypass all the complexities.
All of them. The latency, the regulatory timelines,
Oh.
all the things that come with relying on shared public infrastructure. They gain control, predictability, and just immense speed.
And the energy is built specifically to serve Google's needs.
Not the broader community. The data center's demand is the only thing that matters. And the sources point to a really specific immediate result of this.
Right. This isn't theoretical.
No. The first announced co-located data center and power site is already under construction. It's in Haskell County.
Haskell County, that's a crucial detail. It makes this real. We're not talking about Silicon Valley. We're talking about rural infrastructure being built from the ground up for proprietary compute.
And operationally, Intersect isn't just being swallowed whole.
It keeps some independence.
That's the critical part for how they maintain control. The sources say it remains operationally separate, but, and this is the key phrase, aligned directly with Google's infrastructure roadmap.
So separate in name, but completely centralized in function.
Precisely. It gives Alphabet direct, synchronized control over their growth without having to wait for, utility commissions or public upgrade schedules.
And on the surface, this all sounds pretty reasonable. It's just business efficiency. They're solving a logistics problem.
And the public promise sounds great.
They say this huge expansion will happen without passing costs to grid customers, but let's shift our lens a little, because structural costs aren't always on your monthly utility bill.
That's the pivot point. If we're only talking about financial efficiency, this is a clear win for Alphabet. But the sources suggest the real costs are structural and systemic.
Right. Which takes us into the structural shift this whole thing represents. If the operational side is changing, what does that mean for the leverage the public has?
Well, what's really fascinating here is the sheer concentration of power that results from this.
How so?
Before, even the biggest tech companies were, yes, huge customers, but they were still customers of the shared public grid.
And that shared system has checks and balances.
It has levers, regulatory, community, political levers, all designed to balance different interests. Now you have one corporation controlling the compute demand, the energy generation, and the infrastructure timelines, all at once.
So let's ask the key question then. If these data centers are no longer relying on that shared public energy infrastructure, what leverage does the public actually lose?
You lose the leverage that comes from them needing an essential service that everyone else also needs. Let's go back to that highway analogy.
Okay.
If a giant factory needs the public highway, the community can make demands. They can influence zoning, mandate environmental standards for the trucks, charge taxes for road maintenance.
But if that factory suddenly builds its own private road that bypasses the public system,
They no longer have that shared obligation.
yeah.
And the public loses its ability to influence their operations through those public utility channels.
So their reliance on and their contribution to that shared system just fundamentally changes.
Exactly. Before, they were a major contributor to the system they relied on. Now they're building a parallel system.
And this connects to the bigger picture of innovation itself. If the primary driver for massive energy innovation is now purely to meet proprietary AI demand, how is that different from innovation driven by, say, community need?
It creates what the sources call a bifurcated system, a split system.
Okay, what does that mean?
Innovation in that private proprietary loop. It accelerates incredibly fast. All the capital is focused on serving AI needs, low latency, maximum throughput.
But innovation for the public grid?
It could slow down. The focus on broad community utility, grid resilience, affordable access for everyone, that might not get the same attention. The main beneficiary of energy advancement becomes the company that owns the whole stack.
So the goals of innovation just diverge. One is for speed and profit, the other is for stability and equitable access.
You got it. And the big decisions, where to build a power plant, how much to generate, what tech to use, those are now made internally by Alphabet's infrastructure team.
Not by a regulatory body trying to balance the needs of residents and industry and the environment.
The balance is gone.
Let's pivot to what the source is called the most concerning part of this idea of quiet greed. This is about the silent consequences.
Right. The structural erosion of workforce-linked protections. And this isn't about big, flashy headlines of mass layoffs. It's about what quietly disappears.
So where do people fit into this? What's the human workforce angle?
This is where we have to look at the structural disconnect. Data centers. I mean, they're the engines of the modern economy. They generate massive revenue, trillions in market value.
Right.
But when you look at that revenue compared to the number of people they actually employ, the ratio is minuscule. They achieve this incredible productivity at scale with very, very few human inputs.
And that low staffing has long-term consequences, especially when you pair it with this kind of vertical integration. This is where the analysis of payroll dependence erosion comes in. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, this is a profound question for society. Our entire public funding structure, I'm talking Social Security, Medicare, local school funding, property taxes, it all relies heavily on robust payroll contributions.
From employers and employees.
Exactly. Or just from taxes generated by a large, well-paid local workforce. So when Alphabet builds, say, a $5 billion data center complex that generates enormous economic activity, but only employs 150 people.
Productivity has scaled massively.
But the corresponding funding for public systems, the payroll contributions, they haven't scaled at all.
So the economic activity is happening, but the mechanism that traditionally funds our safety nets just isn't keeping up.
That's it in a nutshell. This consolidation of energy and compute fundamentally reduces their reliance on wage-based systems to get those productivity gains.
Our system just boasts. It implicitly assumed that to scale productivity, you had to scale the human workforce proportionally.
And when you vertically integrate the power source to accelerate automation, you maximize your efficiency while at the same time minimizing the very workforce whose payroll is supposed to fund this social contract.
This brings us to what the sources call the proportionality gap, which is really the ethical core of this quiet greed argument. How is not passing costs to grid customers, which sounds good.
Right, it sounds responsible.
How is that different from not contributing proportionally to the public systems that sustain everyone?
It's the difference between avoiding an immediate direct financial hit to a consumer and creating a slow structural leakage of funding from public systems.
Okay, explain that leakage.
When Alphabet says they won't pass costs to grid customers, they mean your grandma won't see a spike in her monthly bill because of Google's energy use, and that's good.
Of course.
But at the same time, by optimizing for this low-labor hyperproductivity and bypassing shared infrastructure, they are reducing their reliance on, and their contribution to, the very mechanisms that fund the things your grandma relies on.
Schools, roads, Medicare.
All of it. So if the grid customer isn't paying directly, who is?
Is it essentially future taxpayers paying for today's hyper-efficiency?
That's the central implication in the source material. The system is scaling revenue without scaling the societal funding mechanisms that have always been tied to that revenue. The argument is that this implicitly assumes productivity should scale without scaling proportional societal responsibility.
It's a silent reallocation of risk.
A powerful and quiet side effect, yeah. It's hard to campaign against a structural tax erosion, but it's very easy to campaign against a higher utility bill.
Let's bring all these threads together then, in our synthesis.
Mhm.
What does this acquisition, when you look at it through this lens, really mean?
It means this acquisition is a powerful mechanism for reorganizing two things. First, who controlled energy, and second, crucially, who is needed to sustain the resulting productivity gains.
So it's not just a story about buying an energy company.
No, it's a story about reshaping economic and infrastructural dependencies away from the public sphere and deep into proprietary control.
And that reorganization leads directly to a shift in societal risk.
Yes. This vertical integration represents a fundamental shift in who carries that risk. The productivity benefits, the speed, the lower latency, the profit margins, all of that is concentrated in the corporate actors.
The ones who own the compute and the dedicated energy.
But the systemic risk, the risk of underfunded public systems, the erosion of the tax base, the increased demands on the remaining shared infrastructure, that risk shifts away from those actors.
And onto the public systems that are funded by a diminishing pool of human labor payroll.
And the final insight from the sources just summarizes it so clearly.
Give it to us.
It frames it perfectly. AI is not just consuming energy. It is reorganizing who controls it, who pays for it, and who is no longer needed to sustain it.
Yeah.
That consolidation of control over energy and compute, that is the true definition of quiet greed.
Maximizing private gains by quietly minimizing public contribution.
That's what the sources argue.
Thank you for sharing your sources and taking this really foundational deep dive with us. It's so easy to just celebrate technological leaps, but it's far more important to understand the structural shifts underneath them.
Absolutely.
Before we go, here is a provocative thought for you to mull over. Consider the future implications if the foundational elements of our economy, energy, and compute become wholly controlled by entities that measure efficiency purely by productivity gain, completely detached from proportional payroll contribution. What does an infrastructure roadmap even look like when it's designed solely for proprietary computational needs and not for shared public utility? Keep digging, keep questioning, and we'll see you in the